So, good morning, everybody. Thank you for those of us that have joined us this morning on the live session. Welcome to the February session of Daring to Learn. We've got Dr. Alicia Rihn with the University of Tennessee with us this morning. She's going to be talking through some research-based marketing insights for the dairy industry. For those of you who have joined us before for Daring to Learn, welcome back. If this is your first time watching a session of Daring to Learn, this is a monthly webinar that the UT Center for Profitable Agriculture puts on. My name is Elena Boyd. I am an extension assistant in the center. So all of the email communications and reminders that you'll get about Daring to Learn will come from me. Um, I will go ahead and give Dr. Reen a chance to introduce herself, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to her and let her get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Elena. As she said, I am Alicia Rihn over in the Agricultural Economics Department, and really my background is looking into consumer behavior and perceptions and how we can generate value both for that end consumer as well as our firms based on research findings. And so when it comes to the work that I do, I primarily do the research for that end consumer, but with the idea of how can this benefit the industry in order to better those communication lines. I started in 2020, so I've been here going on 5 years and absolutely am in loving Tennessee. So that's kind of my background. I will go ahead and share my screen and we will get going. All right, you all should be able to see that. Okay, so let me just start by doing a few quick acknowledgments. I am going to be covering a couple studies today, and none of this would have been possible without a team in the background, right? So our funding was from the USDA AMS. We have several collaborators, Liz Eckelkamp over in Animal Science and Charlie Martinez in Ag Econ, and we had a bunch of graduate students, both current graduate students and past graduate students participating, including Caitlin Dair-ing, Pralhad Bajgain, Awazar Gamir, and Leanne Hopper. And then, of course, if you want any more information on this, the Southeast Dairy Business Initiative Innovation Initiative website's here, and I'll have that on my question slide as well. So one of the questions I get, particularly from producers, is consumer behavior and perceptions. Why does it matter to me? I may sell wholesale, I may sell other things, but really ultimately it comes down to consumer perceptions being our reality. So on the right, I tend to show this cartoon a lot. The person on the left is looking at the boards and says there are 4, and he or she is correct. The person on the right says there are 3, and that person is also correct. So depending on how you're looking at the situation, those perceptions change. And from the business perspective, if you're trying to sell boards to that person on the right and you say, I have 4 boards for you, that's going to be a problem, right? Because he or she's going to be like, nope, I see 3. I am not paying you for 4 boards, and you're going to lose credibility with that end consumer. And so it's very important to understand what they see and how that impacts their behavior. And that's where we come in with our consumer and marketing research in order to provide marketing insights. So when it comes to this presentation, I have several overall goals. First is cover the relevant research. Second is provide practical implications, and then allow you to brainstorm opportunities within your own context, because what works for one business won't necessarily work for the next. Therefore, okay, that may not be relevant for you, but it may bring up some ideas that would be particularly relevant for your situation. All right. Okay, so I have 3 studies that I am going to touch on today. The first is a farmstead value-added dairy products survey. It's Tennessee, looking at products sold and desired, as well as the advertising and retail channels. The second is the same study, but we're looking at generational differences and who we may want to target with our marketing strategies. And then the third one, we named it Say Cheese. Essentially, we're looking at marketing communications and value using different promotional methods as well as that on-farm dairy store. So the overall goal is, what do your customers want? how do we better meet their needs, and then how can we use that to generate value. So let's start with study one, farmstead dairy products. This one, the overall objective was to look at the current market and marketing opportunities for farmstead dairies in the Southeast United States. We started with just Tennessee. We had 817 participants, and then this study is going to be expanded. It's already partially expanded, but we're going to expand to the other Southeast states. All right, so for our results here, for our farmstead dairy products, the Tennessee consumers, most of them liked all of the products you see here, right? And they could select all of those that they would be interested in buying. But the largest portion of our sample at 78% said they were interested in cheeses. 76% said fluid milk, including flavored milk. 72% said ice cream, and 66% of those ice cream people wanted to eat ice cream on site, okay? And then 70% said they were interested in butter. Now, we also asked, okay, what would the ideal product portfolio look like for you? So if they're going to buy these products or come out to an agribusiness, they really want to have some selection. So they wanted 4 to 5 product types available to them. Now, we all know as we diversify our products, the cost of production increases. So some thoughts that we had in terms of adding diversity without maybe impacting that bottom line too much would be providing different flavors, right? That's an easy, you add a different additive, maybe slight different production process. Second, offer other local products. So pair up or partner with someone who is using products to have something that's complementary. Lean into the local theme. Agritourism opportunities. This is an option for some folks. It's maybe not an option for everyone, but it would be worth exploring. And then selling off farm. And this may be an opportunity to partner with other businesses. In terms of the desired products, so we asked them their interest in products on farm, sold on farm, which is what you see on the left, and then those sold off farm, which is on the right. And the bottom half you can see is kind of our sum of the ice creams and cheeses. And what you can see really is that cheeses came out on top as that product that people really desired, which again, that's aligning with the products they said they were interested in, right? In terms of ice cream, what we see is again, that's a uh, highly desired product by the customer. And then when we look into some of those next popular, as we differentiate those out, what we see is cheddar cheese is the number one thing people were selecting, followed by butter. And then for the on-site ice cream, we saw that more for the on-farm, which makes sense, right? Off-site ice cream is also rated higher. Now, if you look at the products that are available off-farm, we also see yogurt is nearly 50% of the sample said they would be interested in it. Conversely, if you look at the on-farm, people are interested in flavored milk, aged cheese, yogurt, and cream. So if they are making the effort to be on farm, they really are interested in a more diverse array of products. But again, if you're not set up to produce some of these value-added items, there may be someone else who has them that you could supply at your operation and just partner up with folks. In terms of purchasing farmstead milk in general, the majority at 76% of our samples said they would buy them anywhere, regardless of where the retailer was. Interestingly, we saw 28% said they would purchase any of these products on farm, and 6.5% said they would only purchase products on farm. They didn't really want to see them in grocery stores or elsewhere. We did ask farmstead dairies as well as that end customer how they advertise their products and services for the dairies, and then from the customer angle, where they want to hear about this information from or where they have heard it from. And you can see there's a lot of consistency here. So farmstead dairies, 100% of them are doing farm direct advertising, 100% are doing restaurant or retail advertising, and then 94% are word of mouth, generic media, and social media, and 78% use our state promotional program. On the flip side, the customer, they really follow this pretty well, which is good. That means that it's getting through to them through the channels that the industry is trying to reach them through, right? So 49% of customers indicated they'd rather have farm direct communications, which is good because that gives the power back to the farmer in terms of telling their story and their products. 37% said word of mouth, 35% said restaurants or retail establishments, and then it goes down to generic media, social media, and state promotional programs. So ultimately, the moral of the story here is that in order to really reach that end consumer, those top three are the ones that you would want to encourage the most, right? They want something farm direct, something word of mouth, or through other retailers in the area. Okay, so this was top advertising channels. Next, let's look at their top purchasing locations. So this is the retailer. Again, from that dairy perspective as well as that end consumer perspective. So from the dairies, what we see is that 94% of them participate in specialty retailers, 89% in dairy farm related stores, 83 in grocery or convenience stores, 61% delivered to customers, 50% through farmers markets, and 11% through food co-ops. The customer is a little bit different here though, right? So the number one store they went to was grocery or convenience store, and followed by farmers markets, then dairy farm related stores, delivery to customers, specialty retailers, and food cooperatives. So there are some differences here, right? So the customer, they like the convenience factor. So they're going to that grocery store anyway for whatever products they need for food. So they tend to go there more often. Farmers markets, again, there's that experience opportunity, and they tend to go there seeking products of all types. The dairy farm related store, they're expecting to find the products there. Again, it's kind of that event space, the agritourism space. And then the specialty retailers, they don't go there as often, but if you're selling something like cheese that's a little more shelf stable than, say, if you're trying to sell fluid milk, right? So picking those avenues that align with the customer as well as your product offerings is a great way to expand on those product opportunities and engage them more. Okay, so from this study, we have some key implications. The first is think about your current product offerings. Do they align with that customer's needs and wants? So remember some of the top ones they were interested in were cheese in general, ice cream, particularly if you have an on-farm store, that's one that they really enjoyed. And part of that too is when you think about who comes to these stores, it's folks that have some free time or maybe they have children, someone who wants a treat just to be there, right? They're not going to take that ice cream home. They're probably going to eat it on site. And then butter was the third product they were very interested in here in Tennessee. Second thing is customers want product diversity. So how can you meet that need? Is there a partnership opportunity? Maybe you sell your products at a different location with someone else who's selling a complementary product. Can you differentiate your flavors? Are there other opportunities for you to really provide that diversity but not break the bank, right? Our third key implication here is where are your customers getting information and how do you get the word out? So again, we did see in terms of the marketing channels that there was alignment between the farmer and the end customer, right? So they liked Farm Direct. They liked hearing from the farmer. What are you doing? What are you offering? What's your story? Stories are sticky, right? They also liked word of mouth. So if their friend said, "Hey, I went out and bought this cheese and it was amazing," or "Here, let me bring you a charcuterie board. Guess where I got this from?" That works really well because they have more street cred than you or I do, right? These are people that are of similar backgrounds to that customer. They're friends, they trust them. If you can get those folks to have a great experience, then they're more likely to talk about it and share it with their friends and family, right? Restaurants is another great one that they go to for information. So again, if you can partner, um, maybe having mac and cheese on the menu with the local Tennessee dairy cheese, something like that may have a good opportunity for you. And then social media, that one's probably the easiest one to use just because having that social media account gives you the opportunity to provide lots of relevant information at a really low cost, right? It's more labor and thinking up the creative content in order to engage folks. And then number 4 here is consider retail channels that align with your customer expectations. And so this is where we had a little bit of diversity, but again, it comes down to what products you're offering and where you can get in to sell those products and what you have in your resources. So the end consumer prefers grocery, farm direct options. There may be opportunities for e-commerce sales, especially if you have a product that would ship well. So the one thing to consider there, though, is do additional sales cover additional costs? So you'd have to think through logistics, the packaging, shipping, any additional training for your labor, any additional labor that is needed, and marketing those products and their availability. So, in a nutshell, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of really good things occurring in Tennessee with the value added dairy stuff. And this is where we were just kind of sitting with our general study looking at Tennessee value added dairy operations. Now, the second study I want to touch on, we took that same exact study and looked at generational differences. And I'll explain why here in a minute. But the big thing was we wanted to look at differences in terms of interest, response to marketing stimuli, and purchasing preferences for those dairy farmstead dairy products. And the main reason is that each generation, we're divided into generations by age due to having similar historical backgrounds. We've lived through the same events, right? And as a result, we tend to have similar perceptions of things, and also we tend to respond to marketing stimuli very similarly. So we now have an alpha generation. I'm not covering them because they're children, they don't have spending power yet. Gen Z is the youngest generation I'll briefly touch on, and they're born between 1996 and 2015. Millennials are 1980 to 1995. Gen X is 1961 to 79. Baby boomers are 1945 to 1960. And the silent generation are those individuals that are older than the baby boomers. And when we think about these generations, they also respond to different types of communication differently. Now, I'm not going to go over all of these, but let me highlight a few. So, attitudes towards technology. The boomers, they're early information technology adapters. Gen X are digital immigrants, meaning they came on board. Millennials are considered digital natives, meaning that they have pretty much had access to these platforms throughout the majority of their life, or at least their adult life. And then Gen Z are technoholics. They are entirely dependent on IT. They have limited grasp of alternatives. They have had technology immersion since as well as long as they've been here, right? And then in terms of communication media and communication preferences, baby boomers preferred telephones and face-to-face interactions. Okay. Gen X, it was email and text messaging, and that's how they prefer to be communicated with. Millennials were text or social media, and they prefer online and mobile, so text messaging. Some of you may recognize this if you tried to call a millennial and they responded with text. So it kind of checks out if you think about some of your own interactions. And there are always exceptions, all right? And then Gen Z, they are handheld communication devices. They've always had their smartphones or watches. They prefer FaceTime, which kind of merges some of the previous generations. And of particular interest to us, though, not only in this industry but many others, are the millennials. And the reason is it's a very large generation. We have 83 million people, and they have a lot of spending power, $2.5 trillion in spending power, and they do spend about 5% more than the average US consumer, meaning they spend about $70,000 per year, while their earnings are about $71,000 per year. And part of this is that they are now in their prime in terms of employment. They have climbed that job ladder. They have good income coming in. They are first-time home buyers and they are starting families or have young families, meaning that they are buying products, right? They value experiences over perceptions. When you think about agritourism and experiential goods, I count value-added ag as experiential goods because in this context, you're not going to experience the quality and the flavor of that product until you actually buy it and consume it, right? So this is good. They like comfort and convenience, and they also spend money a little more ethically, meaning that if there are environmental or social initiatives being done, this group's willing to spend money to get those products that were produced in an ethically sustainable way. Okay. So those are kind of some of our big differences. So if we look at our study results, and again, we're really focusing on these younger generations, and the reasons are so Gen X had the highest spending or highest household income compared to followed by boomers and then millennials. However, if we look at our weekly dairy expenditures, millennials and Gen X spend more on weekly dairy products or on dairy products weekly rather than baby boomers. They also have a higher food budget for the week. And what it comes down to, though, is that they have a larger household size, right? So they need to buy more products. And many of them, or 41% and 26%, had younger children at home, meaning dairy products and the nutrition they provide are heightened. Okay, so if we look at this for farmstead milk, who buys it? What was interesting here is that it was not significant across the three generations. They're all in the mid to high 90s in terms of their interest in purchasing farmstead milk. However, when it came to awareness, the millennials won out. So 59% of our millennials had heard of farmstead milk prior to the study, compared to 45% for Gen X and 31% for baby boomers. 47% had experienced purchasing it prior to the study, compared to 33% and 19%. And their likelihood of purchasing local products was higher than the other two generations as well. As such, what this means is they already have some existing awareness and they have an inclination to buy these products, which means in terms of marketing and advertising and communicating with them, it's going to be easier to penetrate that market than the slightly older generations. Okay, so this graph shows the percent of Tennessee consumers who purchased these different products at least annually, and it's divided by the generations. So we have millennials and younger in orange, Gen X in yellow, and baby boomers in green. And the big thing here is that across the generations, we have similar buying habits, right? So again, butter's the top one, ice cream, sour cream, yogurt. Um, but when it comes to those millennials, we also have whole milk and flavored milk. So again, thinking back to their household composition, they have children, so they are using milk a little bit more and incorporating those into their diets. Conversely, for Gen X and baby boomers, that low-fat milk option is preferred relative to the other milk or fluid milk options. Okay. And then this slide shows the annual number of times that each of these products were purchased. And again, across the board, what we see is whole milk, butter, ice cream, yogurt, low-fat milk were kind of our top ones. And I organized this based on millennials, those who the highest number of times by millennials down to the lowest. And so they purchase whole milk about 25 times annually. Okay. And so that's what, twice a month, which that checks out with what I'm doing, right? Butter is pretty close, ice cream's a little less, yogurt's a little less, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is everyone. Conversely, what you see is that Gen X tends to pick up, so here are millennials, those are the top four. Gen X picks up for butter, ice cream, yogurt, and low-fat milk. And so if you kind of wanted to hit the sweet spot here, what you'd want is looking at butter, ice cream, and yogurt, but then your milk options, they swing towards whole if it's the millennials and low fat if it's Gen X or the older generations. Okay. So depending on who tends to visit your retail outlet or who tends to buy your products, you may want to consider some of these options. All right. And then this is essentially looking at the sources of where they learned of farmstead milk or other dairy products. And below the orange line, that's kind of where the sweet spot is, right? So 61% learned from other sources. And this was interesting because we asked them to fill in the blank, and essentially they said either they're friends with the people who own the operation, or they drive by that operation relatively frequently and just stop and buy. University visits, as well as state magazines, were all of those other sources of information they were using to hear about these different products. Then media sources were second, just in general, and then farm sources were at about 49%. And in terms of generational differences, we did not see a lot of generational differences here, except what we saw was that millennials are using social media more than Gen X or baby boomers. They are also using restaurant menus more than Gen X and baby boomers. In terms of where they have purchased farmstead milk, here we see a lot of very consistent results, right? So grocery store is always going to win just because people are going there often. It's convenience, it's easy, and they can grab it on the go, right? But then as you start looking at these other options, what we see is that millennials and Gen X tend to visit farmers markets more so than that baby boomer and silent generation. Same with the big box stores. They tend to visit it more. Convenience store, what you see here is the millennials and the boomers visit it more often than Gen X. Same with specialty stores. So again, and when we look down here online, it's millennials are buying it more often, same with home delivery services. So again, depending on who you're targeting, you may want to consider some of these channels, or you may want to um, highlight ways of engaging with millennials and such through these different channels. In terms of where they would like to purchase farmstead milk in the future, again, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff. But here, something interesting happened with that grocery store. It switched to the older generations being more receptive, slightly more receptive. I mean, millennials are still at about 71, 72% saying grocery stores, so they're still up there. But it switched to that older group saying that they were more interested there in receiving their farmstead milk there than the younger generation. Same with big box stores. We saw it a little bit more. Farmers market, farm store or stands, as well as convenience stores were the ones that really stuck out as being desirable locations by millennials. Same with the specialty store. Dairy farm was consistent across all of them, so that's indicating similar levels of interest. Okay. So if we look at some of the key implications here, one thing to be aware of is who is primarily buying your products. Are they millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, a mix of them? And really thinking about how to represent where they are in their stage of life and them. So when it comes to imagery and promotions and ads, people have essentially shown, it's been researched and it has been documented that people are more likely to buy from a company that shows people that are similar to them. Okay. So for example, young child petting a calf. Okay, this would appeal to the millennials and somewhat Gen X simply because they have those young kids at home, right? It's cute. It shows people's images of people tend to resonate well with folks. So having that representational imagery is very important. Second point here is align your firm with their preferences. So what are their preferred means of communication, product offerings, retail channels, initiatives that generate value? Anything that really resonates with that customer, think about ways to get engaged and to communicate that with them. One of the things that I often tell some of my extension clientele is that people don't know unless you tell them, right? We're doing great things. We have great products out on the market, but if you don't tell them about it or about the backstory, the attributes that maybe they don't know until they experience it, well, then that doesn't factor into their decision, right? So it's important to communicate with them. Third point here is where does your market get their information and meet them where they're at? So again, if they are not if you're not communicating where they're expecting communications, you're not going to reach that market, right? So they like the farmers market and getting information there. They like millennials, like social media in terms of gaining information about the farm, the farmer, products, word of mouth. Again, having that experiential good ex the experience of the experiential good and having friends tell their friends is a really important way to have organic marketing. And then anything in store, so the point of sale information to engage folks and get them interested. We mentioned sometimes if you're not very comfortable doing this yourself, think about if you have any employees that are good storytellers and have them help generate relevant content. Now, I have had someone mention in the past that it's hard to get employees to generate content. And if that's the case, the research does show that if you hire a influencer that resonates with your values as well as your customers' values, they tend to get the word out there really well too. It's a form of word of mouth advertising, but it's more of a paid word of mouth advertising. So consider that depending on where you are and who your customer base is. All right, so let's move on to our third study, Say Cheese. This one, really wanted to identify current shopping behaviors and marketing content and assess the impact of marketing communication format, so a graphic versus video, on consumers' value of different cheese attributes. This, we had real people come and participate in the study. We had 111 people come to Knoxville down to our lab and participate, and we had 107 people do an intercept study at an on-farm dairy. And we asked them some of their current purchasing behavior as well as some other information. So let's start with this. And it was interesting because they're spending about $59 per month on dairy items. In terms of the purchases per year, we saw them buying milk most often, followed by cheese, yogurt, and ice cream. And we also asked about on-farm purchasing behavior. So if they're buying on-farm versus the grocery store, what we found was amongst our sample, they were visiting farm stores 2 to 3 times per year. When they visited that farm store, they spent about $42. Nobody goes to a farm store and doesn't buy something. It's a thank you for hosting us thing, right? So there's a bit of peer pressure, but it's also you feel good. You're in the midst of it. You're experiencing it. So they do tend to spend a little bit more when they're on site. But when we asked, okay, retail purchasing locations, where would you prefer to buy these or where have you purchased them? Again, that grocery store just won out, followed by farmers markets, box stores, mass merchandisers, and so on. So we're seeing a consistent story with the grocery store. But then essentially the big thing that grocery stores have though is easy access and convenience. And we asked them, okay, how would different factors increase these for you? And 37% said they would shop at an on-farm dairy retail store. 67% said they would buy at a farmer's market, and 82% said they would go to a restaurant offering these items. So again, if they're going to a restaurant for that experience or the farmer's market, again, it's more that social atmosphere. You tend to see this increase a little bit because it has those value added of the atmosphere as well as that ease of getting there and the convenience of buying other products or a complete meal. So think of partnership opportunities. That was kind of our takeaway from this, is that if you're not set up for it yourself, you may be able to partner with someone who can provide that and then elevate their own value through providing a local cheese or other value-added dairy product. Okay, but here's where things really kind of got different and interesting. We asked if you are, so for example, if someone shares a social media website or post, what do they want to learn about? And you'll notice that all of these are over 50%, meaning that people were interested in all of them. But the top ones here were promotions and sales, retail availability, where can they get that product? Or what retailers can they get the product at? Product availability is where they can get the product. Reviews, operating hours, farm history, and then we take experiential opportunities and so on and so forth. So ultimately, what this tells us is that providing that practical information, particularly online, is very important because if they don't know where that product is and what's available, all of that information, they're not going to buy the product, right? So just having a lot of transparency in terms of practical information, but then also adding the reviews, the history, the experiences, these types of information to kind of add value and make it more real, more lifestyle, more inspirational lifestyle for that end consumer in order to generate value. Okay. So this was a survey instrument that we had used. We also sent them shopping. But before they went shopping, we had a couple marketing treatments. We partnered with Sweetwater Valley. Thank you if any of you are on the call. And we had two treatments. We had this video where the farmer was talking about how they took care of the cattle, the land, the farm history, that type of information. But they also provided all of this information about their farm that we then condensed down into a graphic. So the same information's there with a little less branded content, but it's a still graphic. And what we did was we recorded how this impacted behavior as well as the visual attention to this information. Now, normally I don't go into our data collection methods, but this one is a little unique, so I'm going to talk about it for a minute. So we did a choice experiment, meaning they had product A, product B, and a neither option, and they had to pick one of those three options. Within those options, we had price points, three price points, two colors, yellow and white, whether it was farmstead, dairy, or conventional, whether it was from Holstein milk, which is what you see right here, or made with just cow milk. We had origin Tennessee milk versus US milk, okay? And then the retailer was farm direct or grocery store. And we varied these logo attributes across the bottom, the order, because there is an order effect. We read left to right, top to bottom, and that's where we tend to look. We also left the price, the cheese picture, and the retail location consistent. And the reason we did that is that we were recording what people looked at and how that impacted their behavior. And how we did that is we showed the promotions on these computer monitors and their visual attention were recorded with these cameras at the bottom. Then we sent them shopping in the retail environment using these glasses. There's a camera here that records what people look at, and there's two inward-facing ones that record where the eye fixates and where it moves across the merchandise. And the reason we were interested in that is as we make choices, we gather information. Well, 85% of the information we use is gathered visually. However, as you're looking at any visual stimuli, you're only actually looking at 2% of it. So we wanted to know what captures attention and how does that impact behavior. All right, so this is how we set this up. And for those choice experiments, we were able to see how these different attributes influenced people's willingness to pay, meaning did it generate a premium? And the total is in orange here. The yellow is our video treatment, and the green is our still graphic treatment. And what you can see across the board is having a Tennessee origin relative to US milk origin had generated a premium of $1.36 and up. It was slightly higher when that video treatment was used. With the farm direct compared to the grocery store, again, the video treatment generated the highest premium, but across all three options here, we see a premium being generated relative to that grocery store. And then Holstein milk versus cow milk. Again, here we see that people were willing to pay a premium for these products when the image of the Holstein logo was used. But on this one, we had the flip where instead of the video having the biggest impact, we saw having that still graphic had the biggest impact. And this kind of made sense given that in the graphic we had a lot of Holstein pictures, right? But with the video, we had a little more of that farm history, farm background, meet the farmer. So the farm direct would be a little bit more impactful. Now, in terms of flavor, white versus yellow, there was no significant impact, meaning people did not differentiate. And it was the same type of cheese, it's just one was colored yellow, one was left natural white. And then farmstead versus conventional, that again did not have a significant impact on their willingness to pay for these cheese items. All right. In terms of visual attention, what we were interested in, you can see on the bottom here, this is one of our heat maps, and the areas of red show where the visual attention was concentrated on these images, okay? And we had two metrics we were interested in. Fixation counts, that's when the eye is still, and research has shown that's where information acquisition occurs, meaning people are processing and understanding that information. And then the second one was time to first fixation, meaning once that image was presented to them, how fast did they look at it? How fast did it capture their initial attention? Okay. And so you can kind of see here that we saw some peaks on the logos. Really, that doesn't surprise us because ultimately, compared to text, pictures tend to capture more visual attention, okay? All right, so we graphed this out, and as a reminder, the lower number means that it captures attention faster. Price was consistent with real quick, but it was always in that upper left-hand corner, meaning again, as we read, we start in the upper left, go to the right, and go down. So odds are that's going to capture attention relatively quickly. If you design a website, that's a great place to put your brand. The color also was fairly quickly looked at, but when you think about where that is, it's right next to price, right? So fairly quick. Now, in terms of these other attributes, these were the ones that we really varied. And what you can see is farmstead and conventional, there was not a significant difference there. And then in terms of the significant differences, though, is farm direct, the retail location captured visual attention faster than a retail location being grocery store. In terms of origin, in-state captured visual attention faster than out of state. And then the being made from cow milk generated or captured visual attention faster than the Holstein logo. So I'm going to keep these two green boxes up. So there you go. And then I'm going to pull that information over to the fixation counts. So this is the number of times they fixated on it. And essentially what you can see is for the retail location, people fixated on the grocery store more. They fixated on the out of state more. And then they fixated on Holstein milk more than the cow milk. And what's interesting here is it was the undesirable ones that they tended to think about a little bit more. And it may have been they were weighing their options and what that really means to them. And so just kind of an interesting thing that occurred with our visual attention data. And the ones that generated value then were those, so for example here, the farm direct and in-state generated the more value. They were quicker to identify and say, nope, that's the better option and move on. Then when it came to the Holstein versus the cow milk, it was the Holstein one that generated more value. But when you look at those images, we have a Holstein head and then bottles of milk with a similar background, and it may have taken them longer to process what they were seeing. Okay, last thing I want to talk about with this particular study was our product positioning. So we had this wall of cheese is what I called it, but it's just that horizontal shelf. And this is where we sent them into the store with the glasses. And I want you to watch this video. This is in real time. The circles are the fixations of this person searching this horizontal shelving for cheese. And what's interesting here is you can see this person generally is keeping an eye to the middle of this shelf. They're rarely looking to the back or the front, which in my mind says that if you have high value items or things that you want to move, you may want to position them more in the middle of that horizontal shelf rather than the front and back because those places are not looked at nearly as often as that central location. So more shelf stable things or items that maybe don't tend to move as often. Okay? All right. So, based on this study, we have several key implications as well. The first is consider ways to increase accessibility and availability of the product. Again, this has been consistent, right? So, convenient locations, do you have the bandwidth for a farmer's market? What would be your return on investment? Maybe partnerships with restaurants, wineries, or other stores, or maybe your neighbor goes to the farmer's market and you ask if they'd like to carry some of your product with them. Second, shelf positioning does impact choice. So keep those high demand items in the center, slightly to the front, because people tend to look down, they don't tend to look up, and put the shelf stable items more towards the corners or back. In terms of information people are interested in, they really want that practical information. What's available? Where's it available? How do I get it? As well as some of the points of differentiation. So some of the history, value-added opportunities, events, things like that. They also really do value information. So points of differentiation like agritourism, ways that they can connect or connectedness, the quality of the product, the uniqueness of the product, anything prestige tends to attract folks as well. So limited time offers, right? And then origin does matter. They prefer close or in-state origins. And it's really important to communicate this information. I know this Tennessee Milk logo is old now, that they have an updated one. They updated it right after the study got done. So, anyway, but regardless, having that Tennessee available in the point of sale is really what tends to influence people's decisions. And it's up to us to communicate that because they're not going to know unless we tell them, right? Last one is if you're selling farm direct, use videos. I'm guessing most of you are watching this ice cream scoop instead of reading any of my text here because it's distracting, right? But the point here is that a video is a good way to connect with folks, especially if you're selling farm direct, because it allows you to tell your story. And so there's an opportunity to showcase the cattle, how you feed, milking processes, cheese, farmers, people. It gives you that opportunity to connect with the farm and farmer and introduce people to you and your family and build that relationship, that connection. What I would encourage you to do is break those videos into short attention grabbing clips, less than 20 seconds. People get bored really, really quickly, especially if this is something that comes across like on social media, okay? So just real quick, targeted, on point videos and then position them on Facebook, such as Reels or other social media outlets, depending on your target audience. Remember, stories are sticky, and particularly if you're selling farm direct, videos are a great way to tell that story. The last thing we found was that the breed, if you're able to advertise your breed, people like to learn or hear about that information. So we had our Made with Holstein Milk logo as well as Made with Cow Milk, very consistent. We had a Jersey one, but unfortunately we couldn't get our hands on only Jersey cheese for this study, so we stuck to the Holstein. And people really enjoyed just seeing the Holstein picture, right? Happy cows. And this is an opportunity to educate folks. Cows are cute, but word of warning, be a little selective about the imagery because you want to be aware of what's in the background, right? You don't necessarily want to have dirt or anything along those lines. People are a little oblivious on some of that stuff, and it's okay to be that way. So the clean show barn type situation, right? And then align with their expectations, but also educate. So in general, what we saw through these studies is that value-added dairy products, people like having a selection, preferably having it in the middle or the front shelf space. Information sources tended to be farm direct, word of mouth, restaurant, media in general, and social media. And then the retailer preferences, we really saw that preference for grocery stores. However, they also do go to farmers markets and farm stores or seek out delivery options, particularly those younger generations. And then targeting that younger generation would be beneficial, particularly millennials who have children and the budgets that they are spending money on dairy products a little bit more than the older generations. And then in terms of the information that needs to be put out there, practical information is very important, as well as those experience opportunities, the farm story, the origins, farm direct options, breed information, All of this is really good stuff to tell folks. And then, of course, using that video to really encourage information exchange and educate that customer about what they're buying. So today I covered this top line. These are the 3 studies we currently have. On the bottom, we have 3 more coming up. We're looking at social media content, branding, and the human effect. How do people influence things? We're going deeper into that in-store path to purchase, the video versus still graphic, and the retail setting. And we are also doing a follow-up farmstead dairy products where we've expanded into the other Southeast states, looking at ice cream, cheese, and milk. So keep an eye open. Those will be coming up in the future. And in the meantime, I am just going to leave this slide up for while we go through questions. It's got some good information for you all in terms of the dairy resources here at UT. All right, so that's what I got for you. And in the chat, I see. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Also, guys, I didn't mention this earlier. If you have a question that maybe is too complicated or you'd rather ask it out loud, you can use kind of the raise your hand button, or there's a Q&A feature. We can turn your microphone on and give you guys a chance to ask that out loud. And if there's not any questions, I see one person has hopped off already. Um, Dr. Rihn, if you don't mind, I've got an evaluation survey QR code that I'll pop up here on the screen. Um, that way, if folks
Sure.
don't have any questions, we'll give them a chance to fill out their survey. So I didn't mention this in the beginning of the session, but um, for those of you who are new to Daring to Learn, we offer an evaluation survey at the end of um, every live session. This gives you a chance to fill this out and give us feedback on the webinar, your thoughts on Daring to Learn in general. But also, if you are one of our Tennessee producers and you're looking for that Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program educational credit, you can watch 5 of the 2025 Daring to Learn sessions and fill out the evaluation surveys for those, and we'll turn your name in to the end of the year to our friends at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. That way you guys can qualify for TAEP credit. So I'll leave this up for just a second. Feel free um, to fill that out if you need. And looks like we've got 2 questions actually.
Yeah. So let's see. When you talk about partnering, is it best to stick with a family of dairy or expand with, say, additional farm-raised products? So what I would say is think about your value proposition and try what you're trying to communicate. So your value proposition is all the benefits, everything you're trying to say and communicate about your firm and what you do, right? It's what differentiates you. It's what the customer gets with whenever they interact with your products, services, etc. And the point here, though, is that you want to find something that's complementary but doesn't compete. So for example, if you stick to the family of dairy and you only do cheese, well, maybe someone else does butter and you can merge and go to the farmer's market together. Something like that would be an option. Or if you produce different types of cheeses, that'd be a great thing. If let's see, other farm raised products, I think of like the honey industry and meat industries, things that could potentially, again, elevate your product, showcase it, and continue with that messaging of origin and that value proposition. So really think hard about what you're trying to communicate, what goes with your brand, and what relationships are out there, because you also want to find someone you would work well with. You don't want to pull teeth just to make this happen, right? Let's see. PDF presentation available. Yes, we can make that available for you. I'll send it to Lena, and Lena, can you send that out?
Yes, we'll get the
Perfect.
slides to you all in the follow-up email that will go out after the session. And as always, this recording will go up on our YouTube channel. So if you search for the Center for Profitable Agriculture on YouTube, we have a playlist for Daring to Learn, and that video will go out this week. Looks like
I
Megan also added in the chat some other ideas. She says jams, pickles, meats, breads to go together with cheese on a charcuterie board, as an example.
agreed.
All right. Well, for those of you that are still on the live session with us, if you don't have any more questions, feel free to hop off. If you do have questions, we'll hang around for just a couple more minutes. Otherwise, be on the lookout for follow-up information.